Good afternoon, everybody. Hope everybody's doing well. I know everybody's quite excited about today's events and that this is the last official act we're going to do before we can all go home. And before we get going, Minister, I want to say thank you to a number of people, starting with our clerk and our analyst. We all started this journey 3 years ago, and we have Richard and Shannon and I and TJ were all original members of this committee and gang. We've come a long way since then, and I know, speaking for myself, I never would have made it this far if it wasn't for the support of everybody on this side of the table. So thank you very much. I honestly can't thank you enough. You've been tremendous, because there was lots of times, I will readily admit, I wasn't sure what I was doing. And
you were going to point that out.
Yeah, I know. Well, actually, you did sometimes. So, but I also want to say thank you to all the committee members. We've prided ourselves for 4 years now in having a committee that worked incredibly well together. We disagreed at times, and we did it respectfully. And as a result, we've had a committee that is something that other people have looked at with envy, I think, and that's something we should all be very, very proud of. So thanks to all of you. It's been my pleasure working with all of you. Honestly, it has, and I hope to see all of you in the fall again, and I know you feel the same way too. So, but also the other people behind us, they're the ones who really add a lot to this equation as well. And it's without all of you, none of us could do our jobs. So I want to thank everybody who's on the perimeter of this room, and you make it all happen. Except for the water people. They want to make sure we get out of here quickly, David. So, but Minister, I want to thank you. I know you've had a busy schedule for the last couple of days, and we've had to move the time for this meeting a number of times, and you've been quite gracious in accommodating us and making yourself available. I believe you're in Calgary right now, and we're grateful that you're able to make the time to do this. And we know you only have an hour, so I'm going to stop talking now and turn the floor over to you. So thank you for joining us, Minister.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, and good afternoon, everyone. First of all, I want to acknowledge something that is on everyone's mind today. That is the passing of a colleague and a friend to many. And on behalf of our government and my family, I want to extend my deepest condolences to the family of Mark Warwa, my colleague as well as to our colleagues from the Conservative Party and many others who have lost a friend today. I would also like to take a moment to recognize that I am speaking to you from Treaty 7 territory. Such acknowledgements are important, particularly when we are meeting to talk about doing resource development the right way. Our government's approach to the Trans Mountain Expansion Project and the start of the construction season is a great example of that, of resource development done right. Let me also begin by recognizing that I know this expansion project inspires strong opinions on both sides, for and against. We respect both sides of the debate. And I want to assure everyone that our government took the time required to do the hard work necessary, to hear all voices and consider all evidence, to be able to follow the guidance we received from the Federal Court of Appeal last August. That included asking the National Energy Board to reconsider its recommendation, taking into account the environmental impact of project-related marine shipping. It also included relaunching Phase 3 consultations with Indigenous groups potentially impacted by the project, by doing things differently, engaging in a meaningful two-way dialogue. On that note, I would like to take a moment to sincerely thank the many of the Indigenous communities who welcomed me into their communities for meetings over the last several months. I appreciate your openness, your honesty, your constructive ideas, and sincerity of views. Honorable members, No matter where you stand on TMX, this decision is a positive step forward for all Canadians. It shows in 2019 good projects can move forward when we do the hard work necessary to meet our duty to consult Indigenous peoples and when we take concrete action to protect the environment for our kids, grandkids, and future generations. When we came into office, we took immediate steps to fix the broken review system the Conservatives left behind. When the risk made it too difficult for the private sector to move forward, we stepped in to save the project. When the FCA made its decision back in August 2018, we made the choice to move forward in the right way. And when we finished this process, we were able to come to the right decision to deliver for workers in our energy sector, for Albertans, and for all Canadians. To support a project that will create jobs, diversify markets, support clean energy, and open up new avenues for Indigenous economic prosperity in the process. So where do we go from here now that the expansion has been approved? While these are still early days, we have a clear path forward for construction to begin this season and beyond. The Prime Minister laid out a lot of it Tuesday afternoon as he announced our decision. Minister Morneau expanded on some of these details when he was in Calgary yesterday, talking about the road ahead, about launching exploratory discussion with Indigenous groups interested in economic participation in the expansion, and using TMX's revenues to ensure that Canada is a leader in providing more energy choices. We have also heard from Trans Mountain Corporation about both its readiness and ambition to get started on construction. Ian Anderson, the CEO of the Trans Mountain Corporation, made this very clear yesterday. And that's also what I heard when I visited Trans Mountain Corporation workers yesterday in Edmonton. There were a number of workers there, contractors, and they're ready to proceed on this work on the expansion of the Edmonton terminal, as well as on many of the pumping stations that are required to be built on this expansion. The message is clear. We want to get shovels in the ground this season while continuing to do things differently in the right way. The NEB will soon issue amended Certificate of Public Convenience and Necessity for the project. It will also ensure that TMC has met the NEB's binding reconstruction conditions. The Trans Mountain Corporation, meanwhile, will continue to advance its applications for municipal, provincial, and federal permits. We stand ready to get the federal permits moving. As all of that is happening, our government continues to consult with Indigenous groups, building and expanding our dialogue with Indigenous groups as part of Phase 4 consultations, discussing the potential impacts of the regulatory process on Aboriginal and treaty rights, and working with Indigenous groups to implement the 8 accommodation measures that were co-developed during consultations, including building marine response capacity, restoring fish and fish habitats, enhancing spill prevention, monitoring cumulative effects, and conducting further land studies. We're also moving forward with NEB's 16 recommendations that enhance marine safety, protect species at risk, improve how shipping is managed, and boost emergency response. So the bottom line, there's no doubt there are a lot of moving parts. This is a project that stretches over 1,000 kilometers, and it's moving forward in the right way. As we have already proven with our $1.5 billion Oceans Protection Plan, our $167 million Whales Initiative, and the additional $61.5 million to protect the southern resident killer whale. By reinvesting all of the new corporate revenues as well as profit earned from the sale of TMX in the clean energy project that will power our homes, businesses, communities for generations to come. Before making a decision, we needed to be satisfied that we had met our constitutional obligations, including our legal duty to consult with Indigenous groups potentially affected by the project, as well as upholding the honor of the Crown and addressing the issues identified by the Federal Court of Appeal last summer. We have done that. We accomplished this by doing the hard work required by the court, not by invoking sections of the Constitution that don't apply or by launching fruitless appeals that would have both taken longer than the process we brought in. While conservatives were focused on making up solutions that wouldn't work, we focused on moving this process forward in the right way. And we have confirmation of that, including from former Supreme Court Justice Honorable Frankie Yakabuchi, who was appointed by the as a federal representative to provide us with oversight and direction on the revised consultation and accommodation process. So as I will close where I began, which is to say that we have done the hard work necessary to move forward on TMX the right way, proving that Canada can get good resource projects approved and that we can grow our economy and deliver our natural resources to international markets to support workers, their families, and their communities, all while safeguarding the environment, investing in clean growth, and advancing reconciliation with Indigenous peoples. So, Mr. Chair, I think this is a good place to stop and invite questions. Thank you so much for once again having me today.
Thank you very much, Minister. Mr. Harry, you're going to start us off, I believe.
Just prior to my asking questions of the minister, I'd like to applaud the chair for his exceptional work and leadership for this committee. You've done excellent work.
Thanks, James.
And Minister, it's a thrill to have you back. I was in Calgary yesterday for Minister Murnau's presentation and addressing of the Economic Club of Calgary, and the excitement in the air is present, and there's a hop in the step of people in the room, which is good to see. I think it's fair to say that last year's Federal Court of Appeal decision came somewhat out of the blue. And the court said, and it was clear, we need to do our Indigenous consultation better and our environmental considerations better. But I was chatting with Hannah Wilson in my office this morning, and that's not only happening here in Canada, it's happening in the United States when we look at Keystone XL, Enbridge Line 3, and other energy projects around the United States. The courts have been clear that this is the way things need to be done. And so our government's trying to see that through with Indigenous consultation and environmental protections being at the forefront. But what was done differently this time in consideration of the court's decision that we were working with?
Mr. Chair, first of all, the process we put in place this time was quite different from what was done in the past consultations. First of all, we co-developed the engagement process with input from Indigenous communities. We provided proper training to our staff, and we doubled the capacity of our consultation teams, and they worked tirelessly to engage in a meaningful two-way dialogue, as well as we provided participation funding to Indigenous communities so they can properly participate in the consultation past. We had held more meetings. We met Indigenous communities in their communities. I personally held 45 meetings with Indigenous communities, meeting more than 65 Indigenous leaders, listening and engaging to their concerns. And the outcome is something I am very proud of, which is that we are offering accommodations to Indigenous communities to deal with the concerns about fish habitat, protection of cultural sites, burial grounds, issues related to spill, the health of Salish Sea, issues around southern resident killer whale, and noise, undersea noise, underwater noise, and many other, and the accommodation we're offering, Mr. Speaker, actually go beyond the to mitigate the impact of this particular project, but will they also go far to actually restore some of the issues and some of the damage that has been done, particularly because of the industrial development in the Salish Sea, and they will respond to many of the outstanding issues that communities have identified, not only related to this project, but many of the other cumulative effects of the development that communities have experienced.
Well, thank you for that, Minister. The Trans Mountain Pipeline is important to Calgarians. In fact, it's in the public interest, and it provides jobs not only for Albertans, but it provides us an opportunity to get fair prices for our oil. But none of that is possible without having shovels in the ground, so to speak. So what steps must take place before that can happen? Will shovels be in the ground this construction season?
Through you, Mr. Chair, as I said in my opening remarks, the National Energy Board will issue the certificate in next couple of days. I was in Edmonton. I had a chance to meet with the workers and some of the contractors. They're ready to get onto work, and they're preparing some of the work that does not require some of the regulatory approvals. The company can start mobilizing their contractors, subcontractors. They can start mobilizing their workers. They can start preparing for pre-construction work that is necessary, and they can start applying for permits. As we heard from the Trans Mountain Corporation, they're planning to start and put shovels in the ground by September, and the goal is to complete the construction by mid 2022, so we can start flowing the oil to markets beyond the United States. It is very important, Mr. Chair, to understand that 99% of the oil that we sell to the outside world goes to one customer, which is the United States. Very important customer for us. We need to expand our market with them, but we need to have more customers than one, because we are selling our oil at discount, to which we are losing a lot of money. And over the last number of decades, the situation has been remained the same. We want to make sure that situation changes. That is why getting this project moving forward in the right way and starting construction is very, very important, not only to Alberta workers, but to all Canadians.
And part of the approval of the pipeline was deeply linked to meaningful consultation with Indigenous peoples. But are there ways that we are committing to having Indigenous peoples actually meaningfully benefit from the work actually being done on the Trans Mountain in terms of jobs and other opportunities? But also, I've heard some exciting things around possible equity stakes. Can you inform us about any of those conversations?
Yeah. And through you, Mr. Chair, there are a large number of Indigenous communities that have assigned benefit agreements with the company, and that amounts to close to $400 million of economic opportunities for Indigenous communities. There are other communities that are still in discussions about economic benefits. As Minister Morneau stated here in Calgary, he is launching a process where Indigenous communities can explore options to purchase the pipeline or other way of financial arrangements. This is something that I have personally heard, Mr. Chair, from a large number of communities who are interested in seeking the opportunities for economic opportunities and opportunities for their communities to benefit from resource development. And we see a lot of potential in that, and Minister Morneau is going to be leading that. And that ownership could be, it could be 25% or 50% or even 100% of the ownership can be taken up by the Indigenous communities. And we're also providing funding for Indigenous communities to actually be ready to participate in that process.
Thank you, Chair. And I also just want to express that I've really enjoyed working with you and with all the members of this committee over the past 4 years. Thank you, Minister, for joining us in committee today in response to my request through a motion that was supported here to give some concrete details about the Trans Mountain expansion, which, of course, your government has thankfully approved formally for the second time now in 2.5 years. I just want to start with something that you've mentioned. You certainly the backgrounder, and as you just indicated, says that the government-owned Trans Mountain Corporation is required to seek approvals from the National Energy Board for construction and continued operation. So can you just tell us exactly what the timeline will be for the outstanding hearings, and I understand that there are several, about the route required by the NEB so that construction can start?
So through you, Mr. Chair, as many of you will remember that there were a number of conditions that were attached to this project imposed by the National Energy Board, and Trans Mountain Corporation, like any other private company, would have to comply to those conditions and respond to NEB, and they need to apply for those permits as would any other private company would do so. And and as you heard from Ian Anderson, the CEO, they are putting a process in place to have work with NEB to get those permits issued in an expedited way, and the construction is supposed to be starting in mid-September.
Thank you, Minister. Of course, the Trans Mountain expansion used to be owned by a private company, but now, of course, it's a wholly owned subsidiary by the Government of Canada, which is why I'm asking you. It's also one of the reasons why I assumed your government delayed your decision by a month, which was supposed to have made by May 22nd. I think it would have been reasonable for Canadians to expect for all of those authorizations required by the NEB, as well as permits and construction contracts, to be firmed by the time you gave your second formal approval after spending billions of dollars promising it would be built immediately. But as something else that Ian Anderson said was, as you've indicated, that construction may start sometime in September at the earliest, but that there could still be delays to construction and the completion of the pipeline by anti-energy activists and legal challenges. Unfortunately, those are the same risks that were posed to the project when you first approved it in 2016. So can you just say specifically, what is your government's plan to deal with multiple legal challenges that will be filed by the project's opponents and other levels of government?
Through you, Mr. Chair, first of all, we have done the consultations in a way that it reduces the chances of litigation, and if somebody does take this challenge this decision in the Federal Court of Appeal, we are in a very good position that we have discharged our duty to consult through extensive consultation and the record of consultation that we have kept. It's also very important, Mr. Chair, to understand that unlike conservatives, we will not undermine the due process that needs to be followed. We will not cut corners on the regulatory steps that needs to be taken by the proponent, in this case, relations to the NEB. Because conservatives wanted us to cut corners at every step. We refused to do that. That is why we have reached this decision. We owe it to Alberta workers. We owe it to our energy sector workers to this.
It is not the case that Conservatives have ever advocated for any steps by the NEB to be skipped. Those steps, of course, were all followed and completed when Kinder Morgan, the private sector proponent, was advancing the Trans Mountain expansion, after which you failed to provide the legal and political certainty for them to go ahead. So the Ian Anderson has also indicated that the court injunctions remain in place. So what is your government prepared to do in the case of any foreign-funded or domestic anti-energy protesters that will seek to hold up construction?
Through you, Mr. Chair, as I said earlier, unfortunately, energy sector projects such as controversial because the steps taken by the Stephen Harper government to polarize Canadians by not respecting the Canadians' right to participate or gutting environmental protections that were put in place, we will do whatever we can to ensure that this project moves forward in the right way. As in the case of injunction, I understand that injunction is in place, and we expect anyone who is going to participate in any form of activity that they do that within the means within the rule of law, and the rule of law will be respected. But I'm not going to speculate on something that has not happened. And our goal is to reduce that tension. Our goal is to reduce that polarization. I'm confident that work we have done over the last 7 months will allow us to demonstrate to Canadians that we follow the due process, that we are offering accommodation that appropriately deal with concerns of Indigenous communities.
I think part of the concern is that literally 1 week, last year, 1 week before the Federal Court of Appeal said you failed in your Indigenous consultations last time around, you yourself said you believed that your process would hold up. And then the Prime Minister, the Finance Minister, and the Natural Resources Minister also all promised legislation to give legal and political certainty for the private sector proponent to proceed. And then you didn't deliver, and then you attack anyone who suggests the very thing that your own Prime Minister promised. But let's just talk about costs quickly, since this is a really important aspect to taxpayers, since you've put them on the hook. The parliamentary budget officer says that if you miss this year's construction season, it will cost taxpayers billions of dollars more, and construction increases will reduce the sales value of the pipeline, drops the value of the asset. Can you explain exactly what will be the cost to taxpayers for construction and completion of the Trans Mountain expansion?
Through you, Mr. Chair, it is very important that we see this moving forward on the Trans Mountain Pipeline expansion as an investment in Alberta's economy, in Canadian economy, in workers from Alberta. They deserve that support. We are providing them that support, because having not a single pipeline to get our resources to non-US markets has hurt our potential in Canada. And we
of course, Minister, the vast majority of products shipped through TMX will go to U.S. refineries, and the only two export pipelines have been canceled by your government.
Thank you. Mr. Cannings.
Well, thank you, Minister, for being with us today. I'm just going to pick up on that commentary about First Nations consultation and accommodation that caused the Federal Court of Appeal to rule against the government last year. I was, after the announcement that you were okaying the permits, I heard an interview with Chief Lee Spahan of the Coldwater Band on CBC, and I've seen read interviews with him in the press since then. He said the meaningful dialogue that was supposed to have happened never happened. This is since the court case, and in that court case, the appeal court said missing from Canada's consultation was any attempt to explore how Coldwater's concerns could be addressed. This was a band who really wanted accommodation, demanded a meaningful accommodation, as the courts have said, and they're saying that hasn't happened. I talked to Reuben George of the Tsleil-Waututh recently. They're not happy either. How confident are you that we're not going to go back to litigation? Because it seems that the hard work that needed to be done still has not been done.
To you, Mr. Chair, first of all, we acknowledge and appreciate the diversity of opinion on this project among Indigenous communities as among other Canadians. I have met with Chief Lee a number of times. I have met with the leadership of the Tsleil-Waututh, former chief, and Chief Leah, who's the current chief now, to talk about these issues. As far as the Coldwater is concerned, our discussions with them are continuing. There are a number of options that we are exploring with them on the on to deal with their outstanding issues. Our consultation doesn't end because the approval of this project has been given, and we will continue to work with them.
Saying questions that they asked last February 2018, still haven't been answered. You just said, I think twice, both in your introductory remarks and in your responses to Ms. Stubbs, that really the only reason we need to build this pipeline, we've gone through a heck of a lot in this country to try to get this pipeline built, and apparently the only reason is to get our product to Tidewater so that we'll have access to Asia and we'll get better prices. And you know this isn't true. This is just a false narrative. Nobody in the industry is saying we're going to get better prices in Asia. The best prices for our product are in the United States. They will be for many, many, many years to come. And so why are we doing this? We have these price differentials that happen occasionally. They're nothing to do with the fact that the U.S. is our only customer. It's because there's temporary, shutdowns of pipelines to fix leaks, or refineries in getting repairs. That seems to be the reason we have this price differential, which only covers about 20% of our oil exports. 80% of them get world price because they're exported by companies that are vertically integrated, that have their own upgraders and refineries. So why are we continuing with this false narrative that we're going to get a better price by getting oil to Tidewater when that is simply not true?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I know this issue has been raised by the NDP before, and if you talk to industry folks and you talk to you talk to premiers in Alberta who have been advocating this project, from Notley to Premier Kenney, and 80% of the capacity of the expansion has been already booked by shippers up to 20 years. So that demonstrates to you that there's a demand, and the existing pipeline has been full for last a number of years. There's a capacity that is required, and we believe that building this capacity will allow us to get those resources to global market. But I'm really disappointed to hear the Conservative members saying that TMX will not get our resources to global markets. I hope that members of the Conservative will have a discussion with Premier Kenney and probably be better engaged on that file, because Premier has been advocating with this project because it allows us to get a better price and expand our markets to beyond the U.S.
Okay, I just want to get one more question in before my time's up. I mean, basically, you're admitting that we're not going to get a better price, that the reason we're building this pipeline is because it's an expansion project, because we want, or, the industry wants to expand its operations in the oil sands. And there are none of the risks that cause Kinder Morgan to walk away from this project have been alleviated. BC is still asserting its rights to protect the environment. Many First Nations are still steadfastly against it. Vancouver Burnaby against it. Prime Minister said repeatedly the government can give the permits, but only communities can give permission. So how are you going to convince them that this pipeline is in the national interest? It's a project that will fuel expansion of the oil sands, increase our carbon emissions when we're desperately trying to reduce them. This isn't about getting a better price for our oil. It's about expanding our oil production. And I think this is an opportune time. This was a decision where you could have said, let's join the rest of the world and move toward a no-carbon future. Building a pipeline is locking us into a future where there just won't be there in 20 or 30 years. So why are we doing this?
So the building of the Trans Mountain Pipeline expansion does not undermine or hinder our ability to meet our Paris Agreement commitments. We are putting a price on pollution. We are phasing out coal. We are supporting investment in public transit, and every dollar earned from revenue from this project will be actually invested back into more greener and cleaner economy, so we can accelerate our transition to clean economy. We all know that as world transitions, there will be a demand for oil, and and our oil resources are developed in a sustainable way. Our intensity of emissions from the oil sands is continue to decline. We are supporting industry to further reduce that intensity, and we want to be the supplier of that energy that world needs, and at the same time use the resources and the revenue to accelerate that transition. So it's a win-win situation for our economy, creating jobs, at the same time protecting our environment and dealing with the impacts of climate change.
Thank you, Mr. Cannings. Mr.
Thank you.
Whalen.
Mr. Chair, and I also wanted to pass some thanks along to the interpreters in the booth and the technical folks and the staff who sit behind us and prepare us for these meetings that wouldn't be able to happen without you. And Minister, this is a great week for Canada. I'm really excited about the prospect of Trans Mountain, and you've been a leader in our party, not only on the infrastructure file, but since you've taken over this very delicate but economically vital matter of the twinning of the Trans Mountain pipeline. You've been, a very, what do you call it, a steady hand at the wheel. And I just want to get a sense from you how important this is, not only to you personally, but also to Albertans to have this significant victory in finally getting an opportunity to triple the capacity of this pipeline.
Through you, Mr. Chair, this is a very important project for our country. This is a project that is in the public interest. This is a project that will create thousands of jobs in Alberta, in British Columbia, and in provinces, in Atlantic provinces. As we all know that the growth of the energy sector in Alberta has provided opportunities for many people throughout this country, and people from Atlantic provinces to Ontario, to Quebec, to prairie provinces. When we were in in Fort McMurray last time with the Prime Minister, we met with workers who were there working from British Columbia, working in Fort McMurray. So this is about prosperity for all Canadians, and it's very important for us to recognize and communicate this. This is about expanding our global markets. It's very disappointing that Conservatives see that we don't need to expand our global markets, that we continue to rely on the U.S., which is a very important customer for us, but we did the hard work necessary to get to this stage, and we will continue to do the hard work necessary to ensure it gets to completion.
Thank you very much, Minister. And I have to admit, in your opening remarks, you had chastised the Conservatives for wanting to do appeals and taking a different legislative route. I must admit that I was also nervous about the path that had been chosen, and you and the Minister of Finance convinced me that it was the right way. And of course, I guess now I have to admit that I was wrong on this and you were right. So congratulations on that. But I have also found that some of the opposition rhetoric on this, including at today's meeting where the member suggested somehow that we begin the process of obtaining permits and entering into construction contracts prior to the completion of the process, actually demonstrates the fundamental misunderstanding of how this is meant to work. How irresponsible would it have been to prejudge the outcome or to have rushed this court and constitutionally required process?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I think it is very important that we follow the proper process, that we ensure that proper procedures that are put in place for NEB and proponents to follow, those are followed. Because whenever you undermine them, whenever you undercut them, you get into trouble, and good projects get delayed. Going back to why Trans Mountain Pipeline expansion got into this situation to the first place is that in 2013 and 2014, when the initial review was started, at that time, decision was made by Stephen Harper government not to do the review of marine shipping and understand the impact of marine shipping on the marine environment. And 2018
decisions were made. Sorry, Mr. All those decisions and mistakes that highlighted in the Federal Court of Appeal decision were made when Conservatives were in power?
No, I think we need to take some responsibility as well. They made a mistake of not including the marine shipping and its impact on marine environment. and we did not do a good job on the consultation, and I take full responsibility of that, that's why we need to do better. We need to improve our process to ensure that good projects can move forward.
We've had a lot of difficulty until very recently on clearing exploratory drilling on the East Coast, and of course we have the injunction on TMX. And I'm wondering, C69 seems to achieve the right balance and seems to push us beyond the mistakes that existed in C of 2012 to ensure these types of mistakes don't happen again. Are you confident that that's the case?
I am a firm believer, through you, Mr. Chair, that had we had Bill C69 in place in 2013 when this review was started, Trans Mountain Pipeline would have been completed by now and would have been in operation by now, delivering our resources to non-U.S. markets. It is very important because we are fixing a broken system. And as far as the exploratory oil wells are concerned in Atlantic provinces, having a regional review done actually expedited some of those works to be done quicker.
We're very excited to see that completed in December and provide an off-ramp from exploratory drilling, massive environmental assessments on a well-by-well basis. So that's a great initiative of yours in Minister McKenna's department. Another concern that's been expressed to me is that we want to make sure that the Canadian building trades have access to as much of the work on the Trans Mountain expansion as possible. I know that there's different thresholds and limits in other projects. How can we ensure that Canadian workers benefit as much as possible from this mega project?
Through you, Mr. Chair, it is. When we talk about job creation, we want to make sure that Canadian workers are able to benefit from that job growth. And the building trades have been engaging with Minister Morneau's officials to see what role they can play, because they have the expertise, they have the know-how, they have the workers that have been building pipelines for a long time, and we want to tap into their expertise. And Minister Morneau is exploring options with them to see what role they can play in the construction of the pipeline.
Maybe as a final, very short question, if you allow me, Mr. Chair, there's been some scuttlebutt at the table here about whether or not a constitutional right is implicated in this process. I'm perhaps not as close to this as you, but do you feel that the Section 35 rights of Indigenous people are implicated by the expansion, and whether or not that was something that we were trying to make sure we got right with C69?
I would say that the work we have done through you, Mr. Chair, on the consultation related to Trans Mountain Pipeline expansion, the thoroughness and two-way meaningful conversation and engagement that we had, and the assurance from Justice Yokobuchi that we have corrected the defects of the Federal Court of Appeal and remedy what Federal Court of Appeal wanted us to do, that we have engaged in two-way meaningful dialogue. I am confident that we have fully discharged our duty to consult with Indigenous communities. I know some people, particularly the conservative politicians, wanted us to make consultation with the Indigenous communities optional in Bill C69, which could have been devastating for energy sector projects, because then we would have lost every time we go to the court, and people would have taken us to the court, because you cannot, somehow not fulfill your duty to consult and meet your constitutional obligations for meaningful consultation with Indigenous communities.
I agree, Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Whelan. Mr. Smale, 5 minutes for you.
Thank you, Chair. It seems the Liberals want it both ways here. They want to criticize this process, but yet you approved the pipeline a few years ago. In 2016, I cannot understand how you want to have it both ways. You talk about Indigenous consultation. Okay, Kinder Morgan had 51 Indigenous groups that have signed benefit agreements. Because of your government's handling of this file, it went down to 42, and now you're expecting us to pat you on the back because it's now 48? I can't figure this one out.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I think it is very important I will encourage the honourable member to actually look at the Federal Court of Appeal decision. And appeal was very clear that when the decision was made to not undertake the study of tanker traffic and its impact on marine environment was completely done under Stephen Harper government. We put in a good process.
We're talking about consultation. You could have used the transport report as as your transportation study. You chose not to. We're talking about consultation here.
You cannot do that. You have to discharge your duty to consult, which means that you have to engage in a two-way, meaningful dialogue. Relying on a transportation report is not a substitute for discharging your Section 35 obligations.
So now that the pipeline is owned by the Canadian taxpayer, the finance minister says that your government will only sell it once it gets built. Are Canadians on the hook for any cost overruns? And according to the PBO, the cost to build the twinning is around $14 billion.
As I said earlier through you, Mr. Chair, that this is an investment in Canada. This is an investment in Canadian workers and Canada's energy sector. And this is a commercially viable project. We have professionals at the Trans Mountain Corporation who will undertake further analysis now that approval is given. The refined cost estimates, they will refine construction timelines. This is a project that's going to generate close to $70 billion in revenue for our oil producers. This is a project that will generate close to $45 billion of additional revenue for governments. This is a project that will generate $500 million for federal government that we will use to transition and accelerate investments in green technologies and green projects to make sure that our future generations have clean water, clean air, clean land, that we are reducing the impact of climate change. From every angle you look, this is a good investment in Canada and in Canadians.
It didn't have to be an investment in Canadian taxpayer dollars. It could have been private sector dollars that didn't cost taxpayers a cent, nor put them on the hook for these cost overruns that are potentially very real, considering there are dozens of permits that still need to be given before construction can start. How much longer will this take to get the permits? How much will it cost? And for the first time you announced this week, Trans Mountain will have to purchase offset for construction emissions. How much will that cost Canadian taxpayers?
So as far as the offsets are concerned on the emissions, that was part of the NEB condition that was imposed earlier on, and is part of their commitment that the company has committed to. As far as permits are concerned, there's a process to get those permits issued, and NEB is going to work with the Trans Mountain Corporation to issue those permits. But I think it's very important that we follow the due process, because whenever I know conservatives don't respect due process, they don't respect the rule of law, and they always encourage us to cut corners. And that's how we get into trouble. We will not cut corners. We want to get the construction going on this project in the right way.
Well, under the Conservative government, 4 pipelines were built. 3 more were in the queue. Now we have 0 of those major companies that build pipelines doing business in Canada. They're now doing business in other countries. But that you keep going on with your line of answer there. Now, talking about the federal permits, again, you didn't really give me an idea of how many more permits need to be administered and given before construction can be built, and will Canadian taxpayers be on the hook for the overruns, and have you budgeted for that possibility?
Through you, Mr. Chair, there are, for a large project such as this, there are always municipal, provincial, and federal permits that are required, and there's a process in place to get.
So since you've had 9 months since the court order was given, how come you did not instruct your department to start work on applying for these permits and getting them ready to go so that you can start construction immediately?
After the NEB recommended which was 2 months.
Through you, Mr. Chair, what the honourable member is saying is would have been actually devastating for this project. What the member is suggesting that we should have approved permits prior to giving approval.
It's in response to the NEB recommendation.
Mr. Schmale, your time's up. I'm going to let him finish.
It is, I think, Mr. Chair, is very important to understand that giving approvals to permits prior to the approval of the projects would have undermined the administrative justice and would have undermined the due process. It is irresponsible for anyone to suggest that we do not respect the process of proper approval for these projects, because that is very important, and it would have been devastating for energy sector workers.
Thank you, Minister. Thank you, Mr. Schmale. Ms. Damo.
Chair, and Thank you to the members of the committee for letting me join you today. Minister, I'm proud to be part of a government that takes climate change seriously and knows that pollution can no longer be free. We just can't sit back and do nothing, which is what the Conservatives are doing. And we know that a price on pollution is recognized globally as the most effective way to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and change behaviors. But Minister, I've heard from constituents in my riding expressing concern over the approval of TMX and the fact that the government is building a pipeline at the same time we declared a climate change emergency. People like Chris, a young man who's passionate about climate change and feels we do need to be doing more to transition from a carbon economy, has spoken to me a number of times, and I know he was very upset about the TMX approval. I've got constituents in Oakville, North Burlington, who are passionate about climate change and the environment. Groups like Halton Environmental Network, Halton Climate Collective, Citizens Climate Lobby, Oakville Green, and Burlington Green. And they work tirelessly in our communities to combat climate change. So, Minister, could you explain to these groups and my constituents like Chris how we can justify TMX while also seriously tackling the climate change emergency we face in Canada?
Through you, Mr. Chair, first of all, thank you so much for your leadership on sustainability. We have discussed often how we can provide options for people so they make choices that are sustainable. I want to assure Chris and I want to assure the environmental leaders and people in your constituents that the building of the Trans Mountain Pipeline in any way does not compromise or hinder our ability to meet our Paris commitments. As a matter of fact, it will help us accelerate our investments into clean economy, into green economy, and actually allow us to meet our Paris commitments, because the revenue that we will generate from this project, $500 million, once the construction is completed, you multiply that over the next 20 or 30 years, on top of the billions of dollars that we are already investing into fighting climate change, will allow us to do more. At the same time, also understanding that that production that is happening in the oil sector now needs to move. The best way and the safest way and the cost-effective way to do that is through pipelines, not through railways. As railways cross so many urban centers, this is what I have heard from many of my colleagues, that they rather prefer oil moving by pipeline than by rail, because rail, even though it's safe, right, but it's not as safe as pipelines. So this is a very good investment and will allow, like putting a price on pollution, is a leadership that our government is demonstrating. Investing 1,000 public transit projects throughout this country, having better fuel standards, investing in new technologies that allow emissions to go down, building RV stations, electric vehicle charging stations, investing in millions of dollars of incentives for people to buy electric vehicles. All those things are making a real difference and giving people choices that they can reduce their impact on the environment. We are committed. I can tell you that I am so excited about what we are doing with building of this pipeline, taking action on climate change, that we can grow our economy. We can create thousands of jobs for hardworking Canadians, at the same time make a real difference in the protection of the environment.
Thank you, Minister. And I only have about a minute left. Previous government, when they talked about consultation, it really just meant showing up, telling people what they were doing, and then moving ahead anyway. I know in speaking with your parliamentary secretary, we've had a number of conversations about this was actually meaningful conversation where you went into communities, where you talked to stakeholders in Indigenous communities and actually took that feedback. How did those consultations result in changes to what we're doing with TMX?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I think one of the fundamental difference is that how we engaged with the communities and also how we responded to their concerns. There are more accommodations being offered in this than ever done in the past. We're actually dealing with cumulative impacts of development. We are responding to how to better respond to spill, how we prevent spills from happening, how we protect water, fish habitats, southern resident killer whale, how we protect cultural sites, burial grounds, all those things that have been identified by indigenous communities we are responding to. Another thing that we have done differently, that at political level we have engaged. Pipelines are controversial. Northern Gateway was controversial, Energy East was controversial, Trans Mountain Pipeline expansion was controversial, still controversial. But the effort that we have put in, the effort that I have personally put in, I compare my 45 meetings that I have held with indigenous communities, when I compare how few meetings that conservative ministers held with indigenous communities for 10 years under Stephen Harper, any minister made no effort to actually meet with indigenous communities to directly listen to their concerns and then work with them to resolve those concerns. We have put our time in, and we are very proud of the work we have done.
Thank you, Minister. Thank you, Ms. Dam. We can go to about 10 more minutes. We're in a 5-minute round. What I propose to do is go 4, 4, and 2. That way Mr. Cannings gets to finish it off. I think that's fair in the circumstances. So, Ms. Stubbs, you've got 4 minutes, hard cap.
Okay, thank you.
What?
Thanks, Chair.
Okay.
Minister, as a person who's part of Ojibwe myself, and as a person who represents 9 Indigenous communities in Lakeland who are all involved in oil and gas and support pipelines, I really do hope that this time the Indigenous consultation process implemented by your government holds up. I thought, I did, and I want to say this, I thought the one that you guys implemented in 2016 before you approved it would have held up too. So I mean that sincerely. And I hope for the sake of all Canadians and for the execution of the project that remains the case. There was, of course, a missed opportunity by cancelling the Northern Gateway and losing the opportunity to redo it there. But I just want to clarify the claims about what we are saying in terms of your government's mismanagement of ensuring the permits, the contracts, and the hearings, the timelines and the certainty around those, and why they're a detriment to the project. What we're talking about is when the NEB recommendation for approval was made in April. That was for the second time. Your cabinet was supposed to have responded on May 22nd. Now, I would suggest to you that every Canadian would think it would be utter insanity that your cabinet was actually considering rejecting the Trans Mountain expansion, given that you spent $4.5 billion tax dollars on it last year. So what we are talking about is the timeline that elapsed between the NEB recommendation for your second approval of the Trans Mountain expansion and the announcement your cabinet made on Tuesday. That is when all of the details and all of the specifics should have been firmed up, and they should have been certain, so that Tuesday was not just an announcement of literally the same thing you announced in November 2016, after which literally nothing got done. So that construction would be able to start immediately. You could be accountable to Canadians and taxpayers, giving them a precise date of start, end date, completion, operation, and costs. But so it's mind-boggling to me that a federally owned project with a federally owned builder with a federal government decision failed to secure federal government authorizations and provincial and municipal ones that surely you would have known were required for construction to actually start. That is the certainty you must provide Canadians so that they believe you that the Trans Mountain expansion will actually be built. So I think it's just clear there never actually has been a concrete plan for construction to start.
Mr. Chair is very
I want to tell you, I've heard from drillers in my riding that banks are revoking their loans.
If he does want to answer the question, I suggest
It wasn't a
give him an
question.
opportunity.
It wasn't a question. It was just clarifying our point.
With due respect, your understanding is completely wrong. With due respect, with utmost respect for you, MP Stubbs, what you're suggesting would have actually got us into trouble. Because when federal court made a decision in August of 2018, they quashed the decision. There was no project. We gave new approval on Tuesday to this project, issuing any permits prior to Tuesday's decision would have been in violation of the procedures under NEB, and they would have been taken to court, and we would have lost. I think we would have done more damage. What are you suggesting?
The reality is that you spent $4.5 billion tax dollars last year and promised Canadians the expansion would be built immediately. Here we are today. You have given a second approval, and you have not a single concrete detail or specific plan to assure Canadians when it will start being built, when it will be completed, when it will be in operation, and what the costs will be.
Mr. Graham?
Minister, actually, very quickly, Mr. Chair, just wanted to add to the comments. This is the 5th standing committee that I joined this Parliament, and you're a very easygoing chair, very easy to get along with. When things get tense, you just like zen. It's a really good skill to have. Don't lose it. Minister, when Kinder Morgan owned Trans Mountain, where did the profits go?
To their shareholders.
And where will they go now?
Now, as long as government owns it, they will remain with the government. So taxpayers, Canadians will benefit from those profits.
Yeah, and so that money will go to the green transition, as we talked about.
That is the goal. That $500 million that government will earn in additional tax revenue and corporate revenue will go into a green fund to accelerate our investments into clean and green economy.
How many conditions are attached to this approval? Can you give us a sense?
There are 156 conditions by the NEB. Then there were 16 recommendations made by the NEB that we have adopted that allow us to deal with the cumulative impact on the project. But if you allow me, I think it's very important through you, Mr. Chair, what MP Stubb was suggesting is would have been actually got us into trouble, because issuing permits or even talking about permits prior to the approval would have been violation of the procedures, and they would have been challenged. We do have a plan in place to start construction, and the NEB is going to issue a certificate. They're going to put a process in place for permits to be issued, and the construction is going to start, and the preliminary work can start anytime, and the construction is going to start on this project in September.
Not having this expansion in place, what kind of pressure is it putting on our rail system? And is it affecting our, for example, grain shipments?
Through you, Mr. Chair, thank you so much for actually raising that question, because it is very important. Because if we don't build the pipeline capacity, oil is going to be transported, and that will be transported by rail. And we have actually seen the more oil being shipped by rail, putting pressure on other commodities that needs to be shipped. Not only people's issues around safety, but also hindering the growth in other natural resources sectors such as forestry or mining, or even issues that have been identified by farmers when they are unable to ship their products because of the capacity on the rail system.
Okay, thank you. Oh, we still have a whole minute. All right. Well, I just wanted. I thought I had less time than that. When we're talking about the green transition we talked about before, if we look at Norway as an example, they managed to put $1 trillion in their heritage fund, and their debt to GDP is negative 90%. Negative 90%. Is investing our revenues and investing in the green transition good for our economy?
Oh, absolutely, through you, Mr. Chair, that investing into green economy, into wind, into solar, into tidal, into geothermal, which we're all doing, and supporting creates clean jobs, and they allow us to actually have a better energy mix. And oil and gas will continue to be our energy mix for decades to come. But as you transition, we need to build more renewables, and this investment of $500 million ongoing every year will allow us to do that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Graham. Mr. Cannings, you get the last questions, and you only have 2 minutes to do it.
Last questions of the Parliament. Okay. On Monday, we just passed a motion here in the House of Commons that we are in a climate crisis, a climate emergency. The IPCC says we have to act immediately, like right now, to tackle climate change. And you talk about spending the profits of this pipeline, $500 million a year on green initiatives. We've spent $4.5 billion buying this pipeline. That's where the profits of that pipeline went. They went to Texas when we bought that pipeline. And now we're going to spend another $10 billion building it over the next 2 years. That's about $15 billion we could invest right now fighting climate change instead of spending all that money and then waiting 2 years and then dribbling it out over the next 10, 20, 30 years. We have to do this now. And I just wonder, what sort of economics are you using to try to spin this as a win for climate change? It's just Orwellian.
Through you, Mr. Chair, we are investing today. We are investing $28 billion in public transit over the next 10 years, starting in 2016. We are investing $9 billion. We are investing $9 billion in green infrastructure, starting in 2016. We have put a price on pollution that is actually reducing emissions. You have seen that in British Columbia. We are bringing in better standards on better fuel standards. I was in my province supporting a solar farm where two-sided capturing of energy is tested. We were in my province back a couple of months ago. We are investing in geothermal. If that demonstration is commercialized, will create 50,000 jobs in Alberta. So we're doing all those things. We want to accelerate that more by investing this additional revenue.
Thank you, Mr. Cannings. Minister, thank you. You get the last word. Thank you all again. Minister, I appreciate you making the effort to accommodate us today. I know your schedule has been tight, to say the least. So safe journey back home. And again, to everybody around this table.
Alberta's my home, so I am...
And you've always been very gracious accommodating us and coming to the committee, too. So thank you for that. So, and thank you for sparing us for tomorrow morning. Yeah, there's ending on a high note. Yeah. Okay, so thank you, everybody. We will... see you when we see you. So good luck to all. And let me just say again, it's been a real honor to do this. So thank you.